We're going to start the conference really with a bit of an update on what's been happening over the last year. Since we last had our conference last November. Well, since then, we've gained another 70 Autism Ambassadors, which is absolutely fantastic. We've had 5 online training courses over the course of last year. There's just a few of the happy faces who were brave enough to have their photographs taken during the training. And as you know, we now do these courses online over the course of 2 sessions. So rather than subject people to sort of 4 or 5 hours online, as we would normally do with a face-to-face training session, we now split it a week apart, a couple of hours each week, and we get through the training that way. It seems to work quite well. Yes, it's not quite the same as doing face-to-face training, but it works, and that's the important thing. And we've gained 70 ambassadors as a result of that, which is absolutely fantastic. So welcome to all our ambassadors. Now, the achievements looking back, if we go right back to the start of the Autism Ambassador scheme, which was March 2015, believe it or not, we've actually now trained 956 ambassadors from across the South. Tremendous number. I don't think when we started this in 2015 we had any inclination that it was going to be this sort of numbers, but it is, and that's really, really positive. Some of those ambassadors have not necessarily renewed their ambassadorship over the years, but the thing is, all of them have had that training, so all of them have that knowledge and all of them can share that knowledge, which is the most important thing about the Autism Ambassador scheme. We reckon we have about 321 ambassadors still engaged with the scheme, and we've probably still got some who haven't renewed their membership yet, who probably haven't got around to doing it yet, and who may still do so. So we've still got a lot of people involved in the scheme and actively doing things, as we'll hear a bit more about later. One thing we noticed once we had to move online, once the pandemic hit, was that we were lacking in networking opportunities. This conference, when it was face-to-face, was a great chance for ambassadors to get together face-to-face and have a good old chat. And of course, we can't do that so easily online. So what we did last June was to organise a couple of networking meetings online, with the sole aim of ambassadors being able to chat to one another. We held a daytime one, we held an evening one. 26 ambassadors joined in. It was a really good session, and I think everybody gained from it. And we're going to plan another one early in the new year and try and make these regular things. So it gives a chance just to have a good old chat, exchange views, exchange ideas, and it should work. So we're really pleased to get that underway. Also, we've got 2 new trainers who've joined the scheme. You've already met Caitlin just now, and Linda, who some of you will already know, Linda Burgess, who was the autism lead for Hampshire County Council, who retired last year, but very kindly agreed to come on as a volunteer on the scheme. So Linda's part of the training team now. She and I did the last training course in October. So we're very pleased to have them both on board as well. The annual membership, which of course we introduced a couple of years ago now, and charging for initial training, that is really helping to keep the scheme running. As I'm sure all of you know, we don't have a budget, we don't have regular funding for the scheme. This scheme is all about partnership between a number of organisations who make the thing happen by goodwill, a lot of help in kind, and that makes it work. But actually having a little bit of money coming in helps the scheme running to pay for some of the things we need to cover. And the annual membership and the charging for initial training has made a huge difference. Although it's only a small amount to you ambassadors, it does make a big difference to us. So that's fantastic. And we're really grateful that everybody's renewed and come back on board. Some of you who've been around for a while will know we talked a while ago about a junior Autism Ambassador scheme starting up. We had some meetings before lockdown to try and get something in place. We had a trial planned, and then of course COVID arrived and that put paid to that. This trial is still on the cards. It's still delayed by COVID. Hopefully, I'm keeping my fingers crossed that perhaps next year things will be back a little more to normal, that we can start trialing the junior scheme to see how it goes, to see if it works, see if it's something worth doing. So still on the cards, just still delayed, unfortunately, at the moment. And the other thing I can tell you finally is that all of our partners are fully committed to the scheme. So we have the 4 local authorities, we have Autism Hampshire, we have the NAS South Hampshire branch, and we have Hampshire Autism Voice, and we're all fully committed to keeping the scheme running. And who knows, sometime next year we might hit our 1000th ambassador. Let's keep our fingers crossed that we do. So that's a look back, a very brief look back at what's been achieved over the last year and since the scheme began, and really sets the scene for today. One other thing that we wanted to mention that you may well have heard about, that in July the government published its National Strategy for Autistic Children, Young People and Adults 2021 to 2026. This has been long awaited. This new strategy was due to come out initially at the end of 2019. That was delayed because of the election that happened then, and we were told it would come out in 2020. And of course, we all know what happened in 2020, so it was delayed again. But it did come out in July. So at last, we have a new national autism strategy. It's early days yet. A lot of people are still going through it to look at what it does and what it says. We know there's money attached to it from the government, but at the moment, we don't know quite how that money is going to be circulated, whether it's all new money or whether it's money that had already been promised or what. So there's lots of things still to find out about. But what's happening in Hampshire is the Hampshire Autism Partnership Board is about to get underway, updating its existing adults and children's autism strategies, and we're going to put them all into one all-age strategy in line with the new national strategy. And work on that is literally about to start. We're actually putting together some work groups at the moment, and the next few months are going to be a very busy few months while we look at the Hampshire autism strategy and bring it up to date and in line with the new national strategy. Now, it would take far too long here today to go through all the things in the new national strategy, but this national strategy focuses on 6 priority areas. And those areas cover the understanding and acceptance of autism within society. Well, that is very much where the Autism Ambassador scheme already fits. And we have other initiatives that we've already have that fit within that. But that's an absolutely key area of the new national strategy. Then there's a bit on education and transition into adulthood, another absolutely important area that is covered by the new autism strategy. Then it covers employment as well, huge topic, of course, very topical at the moment. And as you know, we had guests at our conference last year talking about employment. Then the 4th area is tackling health and care inequalities. Then there's building the right support in the community and supporting people in inpatient care. And then finally, support within the criminal and youth justice systems. So those are the key areas. Of course, there are lots of other areas that need to be looked at as well, but those are the key areas that have appeared in the new national autism strategy. And this new strategy isn't a replacement for the old strategy. It's something that builds on what's already there. So all the things that are in the old strategy are still there, but these new things will come in and there'll be more emphasis put on those. So it's going to be a very interesting year, I think, this next year to see exactly what happens as a result of the new autism strategy and how far we go. So that's the new autism strategy, which I thought if you hadn't heard about it already, you might like to know. So now I'm very pleased to welcome our special guest all the way from Australia. It's evening over in Australia at the moment, whereas we've just got up. I'm sure Wen is just thinking about wanting to get to bed. But we're really pleased that Wen has been able to join us today, and we thank Wen for sending in the video that you've all hopefully had a chance to see, the excellent video that he sent in about a month ago. And when we sent that video, as you all know, we asked for any questions that you had about anything that Wen talks about. We compiled those questions, sent them off to Wen last week, and it's now my pleasure to hand over to Wen to go through some of those questions and to talk to us for about the next 40 minutes. So Wen, very warm welcome to our conference, and handing over to you now.
Thank you very, very much. I wasn't sure whether to put the sort of questions onto a PowerPoint or whatever, but I decided I would type answers out underneath them and then bring that Word document up on my screen so that I could read and add to what I've written as I do. So it's not to share necessarily, but if anybody wants these, I can email them David afterwards.
That's fine. Thank you, Wen.
Thank you. So thanks for having me. It's nearly 9 o'clock at night over here, and I've got my special dog. He's sitting on my desk. He goes all different colours. It's wonderful. So you can sit there, and on this side I've got Koala. He's just very cuddly. They sit there to encourage me, which is nice. Okay, so questions that have been sent in and I was asked to talk about are things like, number one, what key things can an autism ambassador do that will be of most benefit to autistic people? And I thought long and hard about this, and I thought, really, it's about getting to know us as people and especially getting to know our strengths. I remember when I was growing up, all too often, all the things that I couldn't do and all the things I couldn't manage were always the topic that seems to haunt me the most. And people rarely focused on things I could do. Understanding, as autistic people, we're really very single-minded by default, so our brains are wired up to be single-minded, one thing at a time people. We can multitask, but usually not outside of our interest, so it's quite difficult. You know, if you think about driving a car, that's multitasking. A lot of autistic people drive cars, but it's probably because they were really motivated to be able to do that. So working with us, but one thing at a time. I think that's the biggest thing I would say of benefit to us all, wherever we are on the spectrum as autistic people. We're very single-minded. We do one thing at a time, get to know us, focus on our strengths. Second question I was asked says, can you give more information about Erlin lenses and how they work for me? Helen Erlin is the person behind that concept of coloured lenses, and I don't know if you can see this, but if I take them off, I don't know if you can see that or not, but they're kind of, mine are sort of a pinky colour, and I've had rose coloured glasses for many years, ever since I was, I don't know, probably for the last 30 years probably. They help with things. If you're dyslexic, I'm dyslexic, so they help with stopping the print from moving around when I read, which is really quite useful. But they also help me with navigating space. So I'm dyspraxic, which means I'm pretty clumsy, and it's pretty common as autistic people. You probably know that autism rarely travels alone. Autism comes with cousins, and that means we're often ADHD. Up to 75% of us are. We may be PDA, and you can look these things up or ask and I will write and tell you about them. But dyspraxic and dyslexic are often two of the things that we come with. So that means if you're dyslexic, problems with writing, reading, spelling. When I was a kid, I used to write, and all my words would be one after the other, no spaces. And then somebody said, if you put your finger there, you write one word, put a finger there, make a space, write the next word. It's very laborious, but I got the hang of it over time. But it was still really difficult to get letters in the right order for words and things, and I still struggle. But my Erlin lenses really help, and you know, I'd recommend that people try them out. If you're unsure, you can buy a pack of those coloured Perspex document folders. They come in, you know, pink, purple, yellow, red, green, that sort of thing. And you can slide a young person or an older person's piece of writing or a picture underneath the Perspex. Try different colours and see which one kind of draws their attention. And if they keep going back to the yellow, maybe they need yellow lenses. If they keep going back to the purple, maybe they need a purple lens. It might help. And that's an inexpensive way of testing to see whether they do actually help. Helen Erlin is from the US, and she's still very much alive. I engage with her sometimes over Zoom, and on this sheet of paper that I'll send across, there's a web address. It's an Australian one, but it gives you all sorts of information about Erlin lenses, and that's spelled IRLEN. Question 3 says, when an autistic person has a meltdown, I always find that word difficult because we don't actually melt. We might go down, but I know what they mean. It's like shutting down and closing down, and you just can't respond in a way that you might like, and you might really lose the ability to stay in control. You might get angry, and all sorts of things can happen. I think that's what they mean. If it's a burnout, then that's a different thing. That's when lots of meltdowns and shutdowns happen over time. They kind of accumulate until you're burnt out. And if you are in a place of burnout, it can take 12 months or so to recover. Whereas meltdowns, shutdowns, sensory overload, those sorts of things, those moments mightn't last long, but they're pretty dramatic when they happen. So if we have a meltdown, we are sensorially overloaded. That means our sensory system, what we see, what we hear, what we touch, smell, taste, that kind of external sensory system is usually overloaded through all sorts of reasons, and we can't actually cope with anymore. So please don't hug, touch, or even talk to us, because those things actually add further information that closes us off further. The better option is to work with us when we're in a good place and prepare us for what to do if we're not coping. Then you practice what to do, so that should for any reason I'm overwhelmed, you might just have to hold up a pink card or have a word that I've come to understand as we've practiced that will let me know I can walk quietly into this room, sit down, shut the door, no one will talk to me. If I'm out in the middle of the road or a town or a shopping centre, you know, you can have a different place or thing to do, which I've already practiced doing when I'm okay, so that I can put that into practice when I'm not. Obviously, the better thing is not to get overwhelmed in the beginning. That's really hard, because the world we all live in is very definitely an overwhelming place, even without anything being sort of asked of us, really. We're sort of born as square pegs and they try and fit us into round holes and things like that. So very uncomfortable. Question 4, I hope you can hear me and this is all working okay. Question 4 says, can you explain more about why you use your name rather than I or me? Does it help if others address you by name rather than, you know, by some other means? And before my transition, I lived for 62 years in the female form, and I've now been living in my male form, which is the true me, for about 8 years. And before I transition, if people said, well, if you are you, who am I? People often talked about you, and I kept thinking, but you are you, so who am I? So I used to get so confused about this. So the best thing was to use my name, because I know that's me, that's who I'm called. But it's really of interest that once I transitioned into my fuller, more at home self, when I stopped needing to use my name, and I could then talk about me or I, because I know that you are I, you are you, and I am I, and it wasn't so confusing. I cannot explain that, but that's what happened. But for many autistic people, it's really common, especially children, to use their name, because separating self from other is quite a long process as you're growing up, and we're very literal people. We take people's words literally, we believe them, and it can get quite confusing. You know, the metaphors that people use, so many metaphors, and it's really hard. By the time you've decoded that metaphor, people have often moved on, and even words like I and you can have a metaphorical kind of significance. If you don't know that they mean you, I remember in the car, traveling in the car, and somebody was talking, and then they said, oh, didn't you hear what I just said? And I thought, I wonder who they're talking to. And I didn't reply, and then the person said, oi! And I saw them looking at me in the mirror. I looked behind me. I thought, oh, perhaps they mean me. And I said, oh, do you mean me? And they said, there's nobody else in the car, mate. Okay. That doesn't mean I naturally necessarily understand that you're talking to me. You could be talking to anybody. Sometimes in a classroom, a teacher will say, okay, everybody. Well, that doesn't include me. I'm When, I'm not everybody. Who are they talking about? Anyway, those things are really common in autism. Number 5 question says, many autistic people experience processing delay. Does this affect you, and what helps you overcome this? And when we talk about processing delay, we mean I can hear the conversation or the words that are being spoken, but I've often got to translate them or decode them, especially if people are using a lot of metaphor. It doesn't necessarily mean that I'm keeping up with the conversation. It's really difficult. So I think a 10-second rule, a 10-second rule is a very useful tool. That means just counting, you don't have to count out loud, just to yourself, giving me that 10 seconds to process what's been said. And if I don't reply, it's a good idea to say what you said again, resist paraphrasing. People paraphrase all the time. If they think you haven't heard them, they'll say the same thing in a different way. But for autistic people, when you say the same thing, it isn't the same thing. If it's said in a different way, it's a different thing. And so I've got to then decode that second thing too, which of course slows everything down. So the 10-second rule is a very useful tool, in my opinion. I had a question on diagnosis. It says, question 6, how can the diagnostic rate for autism be increased for people aged greater than 40 years, especially those aged greater than 60 years? It's kind of an interesting question, but the rate of diagnosis for adults has really, if I understand the metaphor, shot through the roof. That means it's gotten very high. And that's because we're, for a number of reasons, but we're so much more aware of what autism looks like in adults. For many, many, many years, it was believed it was only children that were autistic. And in fact, it was believed that only male children were autistic, which is a total myth, completely wrong. Anybody can be autistic. Well, not anybody, you've got to qualify for autism. We're pretty choosy. But anyway, going through the diagnostic process is difficult because professionals are not necessarily educated about working with adults. Currently, there's no real diagnostic questionnaire. Well, there is one that's being used. I don't think it's far from Hampshire actually, but it's still sort of being trialled, and I'm hoping to be trained in how to use that one. So people use what they call the autism quotient, the empathy quotient, emotional quotient. These are tests that have been devised, but the power of them, that means the accuracy isn't always on top of what's happening for that person, because by the time you get to be over 60, had lots of years to live in this world, and you've probably spent a lot of time observing what to do, how to, I call it adaptively morph. So you morph into the furniture. You don't really, but you kind of hide or camouflage your true nature to keep yourself safe, to protect yourself, keep yourself out of trouble, stop yourself being bullied, and so on. Well, people these days are coming out from behind that mask and are saying, I've been diagnosed with GAD or general anxiety disorder, or I've been diagnosed with this or that, but actually I want to be assessed for autism. So there is an increase of older people because there's a spotlight on them in ways that hasn't happened before. And we do need professionals to be educated. Lots of adults over this age have already got a mental health diagnosis, and that might be true. That might be they are living with depression and anxiety and other things. But it could also be that autism is their primary reason for needing to be looked at in that way, because not coping with life as autistic people in a non-autistic world can be really hard. There's also lots of people are retiring, so they're giving up their main occupation in life, and what do they move into without that work? Now, I know it's worse for the guys, but again, there's a reason to explore what's happening for that person. So we need education, please, professionals, so that you can actually spot what you're looking for and see past the mask, see past the mental health diagnosis, if there is one, and meet the person. Question 7 says, when you received your diagnosis, how did you feel about it? Did you ever think you would be doing the things you are doing now? And this person says, I worked with autistic pupils in secondary mainstream school, and however, these pupils often feel worthless. Oh, that's really sad, and it hurts like anything to read those sorts of words. But unfortunately, there's the typical world out there. We call that world the allistic, 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 and there's the autistic world. And in the allistic world, there's all these assumed norms of how a person should be. You've got to be that size, that tall, that colour hair, that occupation, etc. So it's very, very easy in the world of autism to feel that you don't have value, because quite often, as an autistic person, that, round peg in the square hole, square peg in the round hole, whichever way you look at it, we don't fit. And if you don't fit, you don't belong, you don't have a sense of community, you don't have a sense of worth, which is really hard. So when I got my diagnosis, finally, it made sense of who I am and why I do what I do. Nothing else ever explained to me who I am in the way that autism does and did back then. So I did welcome my diagnosis. I hadn't really any understanding at that time, back in 1993, except that movie in the 80s of Rain Man, and I didn't feel that was me. So it was kind of hard. There weren't a lot of books, there weren't a lot of organisations, there certainly weren't autism ambassadors. Some of you might be autistic, that would be good. So there wasn't a lot of support, and it was really, really difficult. Fortunately for me, a lass at that time called Donna Williams, who'd written the book, and Temple Grandin, who'd written the book, as I got to know them, I got to share bits and pieces of my life with them. I felt less alone, and eventually over the years, of course, we have all sorts of autistic and autism communities where people can join on Facebook or on Twitter or, in various ways to feel connected, and face-to-face organisations too, which of course COVID has impacted on. But yeah, so these days, and I thought I was told actually that I wouldn't amount to anything, which is a horrible thing to say, because my first diagnosis as a 2-year-old was intellectual disability. And on paper, my IQ is 80, just over 80. It doesn't look very good actually, but in spite of all that, I went back to school at the age of 32. I did year 11 and 12. I went to university and got a degree in psychology, and then honours, and on to PhD. And so these days, I'm an author, a psychologist, and a researcher. The researcher is particularly special to me. I've been very excited. Universities here in Australia, to get funding, if they're researching in any way, anything to do with autism, it has to be co-produced, otherwise they don't get funded. So that means they have to have autistic people as part of their research team, which is very exciting. So no, I never expected to be who I am, where I am today, and I'm very, very thankful and very privileged, and I know that. So take heart, young people, please. Focus on strengths, focus on things you can do, and you'd be surprised. You might not know this, but universities are actually sheltered workshops for a lot of autistic people. But don't say I said that. Okay, parents. Question 8. Do you feel that autistic parents receive enough support? What do you think are the challenges and barriers that autistic parents face, both in terms of recognising they are autistic and accessing diagnosis, and in terms of accessing support? And the answer is no. They're not given enough support at all, and again makes my heart feel sad. I am an autistic parent. I have autistic children who grew up, and they're autistic parents now to their autistic children, and it's it's such a common complaint that there is not enough support. And getting diagnosed as an adult in the first place, which is getting better, but it's still really, really hard. Long waiting lists and very expensive, apparently, so I'm told. So it is very hard. So the challenges are many, especially if you have reached adulthood and escaped a diagnosis. Knowing you are autistic often happens when you recognize yourself in your autistic child. My youngest son was diagnosed when he was nearly 12. And yes, I thought, there's lots of things about me that are just like him. And I got my diagnosis literally, I think, just a couple of months later. So getting diagnosed is really a long process, fraught with obstacles, lots of obstacles along the way. You go to a GP, you try to get a referral, and you have to explain yourself, which is not right. You should not have to explain yourself. You should just be able to request what it is you need and get on with it, really. But that doesn't happen so easily. Self-diagnosis is helpful, and because you recognize who you are, you can at least join autistic groups on Facebook, for example, and find the sort of support and community that you need. Because outside of the autistic community, it's really, really hard to have the understanding that we need as autistic parents. We feel guilty. We feel somehow wrong. It was our fault. We had autistic children. Well, certainly I did anyway. I used to think, golly, if only I'd known. But that's not helpful. We are who we are, and we need to perhaps remind ourselves that most of the major discoveries in the world, be it things like iPads with Steve Jobs and computers and Windows, electricity, penicillin, huge amounts of discoveries were likely made, most of them likely made by autistic people, because we're really good at being single-minded and at tuning in to what it is that we are focused on, and rather than getting called away by social things like social things. Okay, next question. Go away, I don't want you. Next question is question number 9. I hope I'm not going too fast. I'll slow myself down a bit. What advice would you give to any parent to help them to get through the parent blaming period when trying to get a diagnosis for their child? Again, really difficult. Even though it's not written down anymore, there's still this myth that somehow you've not been a good enough mother or a father, and that your kids are the way they are because they're naughty, difficult, they need more discipline. I remember being in a supermarket with one of my boys, I think probably 2 of them, and they were having a bit of a rough time. I remember picking one of them up, and he was too big to go in a trolley, but I put him in the trolley anyway because I needed to contain him a little bit. And I remember racing after the other one. It was very difficult. And I remember being in the queue at the checkout and the person behind me very loudly saying that parents today don't know how to discipline their children. It's not about discipline. If you've got autistic children, they're having such a tough time trying to understand the world. They haven't got a clue about lots of things that non-autistic kids seem to just automatically know. So it's very easy to feel guilty. And going through that process to get a diagnosis, which can take a long time. You can register for a diagnosis, you can submit your forms, and still be 2 or 3 years before your little person gets assessed. That's not okay. It's not right. I hope that it will only improve and get better. But it's so easy to feel guilty as a parent. And there's no need. There's nothing that we can do about the genes that we have and the way that we're made. Brown hair, blonde hair, blue eyes, brown eyes, we don't have a say in it. And we don't have a say in if our kids are autistic or not. And I'm actually really pleased. Secretly, our family rejoices. Every member in our family is autistic. We all understand one another and we know what each other needs. The school didn't do too well with 2 of my granddaughters. So their mum is homeschooling them. That's a bit sad. But you've got to do what's best for the children. So that guilt is false guilt and it's unhelpful. So hang on in there, connect with others if you can. This journey is one better faced with the support of others rather than trying to make it alone. And please don't give up if you're not listened to. Don't give up if you're not listened to. Trust your instincts. Pursue the diagnosis, a bit like a dog with a bone, really. Sorry, the dog here is giving me funny looks. That just means don't give up. It's really important. And I know some people think, oh, they'll grow out of it. I've heard this, that's how I know it. Or they think it's better not to give this young person a label because he or she will be stigmatized. But you know, honestly, the earlier we know, the better equipped we will be to deal with who we are and what we have to go through with. So that's not the best way to think about it, really. Number 10 is a question on employment. How do you work with an individual who only agrees to limited disclosure of their diagnosis to colleagues? How does this impact what adjustments you can put in place? Now, actually, it's every person's right to process their diagnosis and choose who they tell. Not bound to tell colleagues or employers. Needing support, when you think about it, is common for all people, for all of us, autistic or no. We have a right to appropriate support even without the autism label. So if somebody needs supports, I would encourage them to say, I will do the job best if I can have a tea break where I take myself out and just go for a short walk, or I don't have to sit in the staff room with everybody else, or I need to wear headphones or ear defenders if I'm sitting in the staff room. You don't actually have to say, because I'm autistic. If you feel strong enough and able, and you feel that in this situation it will be heard and understood, go for it. I mean, I tell everybody because I don't actually care, but that's just my personality and my disposition. And it mightn't be another person's, and it's certainly not a necessary thing. You don't have to tell your colleagues and employers. You don't have to put yourself out there if you don't feel up to it, but you are entitled to accommodations and the right things that you need to be able to do the job well. So you could put it that way. Some people will say things differently because they don't feel comfortable with saying I'm autistic. They might see I have some specific needs and I need you to hear what they are, and I want to share this with you so that I can, be the best worker for this particular job, and so on. So have a think about it. I know not everybody will agree with me, but it is getting better. People are accepting us as autistic people. It's getting better, but we're definitely not there yet. Question number 11 is on gender. Should autism assessment and our neurodevelopmental clinics access or screen all patients for gender dysphoria as part of the assessment process? I don't think so. Personally, I've put here, no. If the car doesn't need a service, don't take it to the garage. Why would people put this on an individual? And all that stuff you've got to go through just to get an assessment for autism, and then you're going to screen them for gender stuff as well, which will be really difficult to do. As an autistic person, I had no idea I was transgender until, I don't know, I would have been much older, much older than when I first got my assessment for autism. It takes us sometimes a bit longer to know who we are, longer to work things out. There are certainly some autistic people who know by the time they're 3 or 4. I've come across them, but we might not be. So putting extra things on us that we don't need, I really don't think we need to do that. I really don't. If a parent suspects that there are some issues gender-wise, talk to your young person. Young person, talk to your parents if you feel safe to do so. Talk to someone you trust, and explore that by all means. But I don't think it should naturally just be part of a screening process. So that second part of the question, if so at what age, is redundant really, because there isn't an age. coming to an understanding can take a long time. And, you know, even typically developing people or allistic population, for them, getting to understand themselves, people go through gender change, as in not transition, but an understanding about their gender at many points as they're growing up. You get young people who may be tomboys, and that just means they're kind of a boyish girl when they're young. And then as they get older, they might try on makeup and whatever and feel more comfortable in more girly things. And then that'll change again as they get older. So it might be of one gender, but how you express that and how you relate to who you are can change over time. So and again, this is just an opinion that I think for those reasons, if a car doesn't need a service, don't take it to the garage. Number 12 says, are autistic children with gender dysphoria going to have greater challenges than non-autistic children in giving informed consent to the administration of puberty blockers? So gender dysphoria, the term means that the person's assigned gender at birth, they were told they were girl or boy, but they didn't know they were babies, but you know, eventually they're brought up in the form of boy or girl, usually. And over time, if they become unhappy, don't feel comfortable in their skin anymore, and maybe start to question, I just don't feel right. The girl part of me isn't who I am. The boy part of me, I'm just not at home in that part of who I am. As autistic children, then that kind of knowledge can take a bit longer, quite often, as I said already. And being of an age to give consent to puberty blockers, here in Australia, our local gender clinic, which is part of the Melbourne Children's, from my part of Australia, the Melbourne Children's Hospital, work alongside the family, the young person, parents, and professionals. No one has to make these big decisions on their own. So it's not really a matter of, is this autistic child able to consent? It's, let's listen to the doctors, let's have some counselling, let's explore, let's talk, let's unpack what's happening, and see where we go from that. I think puberty blockers are amazing if somebody really is living with gender dysphoria, and the doctors establish that, the psychologist will establish that with the paediatrician and so on, and the parents and the child. It should always be nothing about me without me. So it's not being done to me, it's being a process that I go through with those people who are trained to understand and to notice. And what puberty blockers do is it just slows everything down and gives everybody some time. And autistic kids need time. Remember that processing thing, 10-second rule? 10 seconds is not enough when it comes to working through issues around gender dysphoria. It gives everybody time to build connections, to understand, to research, to explore, and to get a plan together, a map really, of what to do, when, who with, and so on. So I think it's very important. You don't make this decision alone. You do it involved with the professionals that are working with you, hopefully through a decent gender clinic. The Melbourne Gender Clinics is amazing. I've got some links on the sheet of paper here when I send this through so that people can click on those and look at it. I mean, you've only got to Google it really, but there's YouTube pieces to watch and so on. And question 13 says, does he, and I think that's meant to be me, think that diagnosis of other mental health conditions is a barrier to gender identity healthcare help? And unfortunately, it often is. It's really, really depressing. But if you get a mental health diagnosis for depression, anxiety, an eating disorder, and various others, it often is, and you're autistic, it often is a barrier to getting proper help, gender identity, health care help. It shouldn't be, but it often is. The mental health condition has medical professionals and family believing a person's mental health, to scroll down, might confuse them or make it difficult to know their own mind, then that can impact, unfortunately, on the decisions that people make. Or if they think hormones might hinder and not help, sometimes before you go to crossover hormones, there are reasons why puberty blockers can't be given. Sometimes there are medical and mental health reasons for taking longer to work through stuff, and they do impact. I wish they didn't, but they do. There's a really good video, I'll try and put the link on to send it to you, where autistic young people are talking about their mental health issues and their gender needs. And it's really, I know it's Australian, but it's really worth watching. And then this last question, what are that's me, my feelings on neuroqueer theory and practice? And I hadn't come across this term before, so I had to look it up. And I've put a link on this piece of paper so you can look it up too. Neuroqueer theory and practice. And it's really about, well, it's a bit about challenging things, I think. What I've written here is, it seems a reasonable practice for some who want to expand and explore beyond their own neurodivergence and question their differences, including their cognitive style, gender identity, and sexuality. And it might impact dress code, the company that you choose, a whole heap of things. Neuroqueer theory and practice. I think it's all well and good as long as communication stays open and is not closed down. We're all scared of difference, I think. We're all scared of things we don't understand. I was scared when I read that word. What on earth's that? So it is all very scary. But as children grow and they move into teenage years, they are meant to question. They are meant to rebel a bit. It's part of learning how to become an adult and make your own decisions and so on. It's part of personal autonomy. So it's not that we can ban thinking that's different to ours, whatever that is. It's that we stay open and in good communication, and we don't close somebody down because of that different way of perceiving the world. So that was the last question. I know this should be a little bit, maybe 5 more minutes of time or something, so I'll close this paper. And if you want to ask me a question, or if the commentator person, that's not the right name, never mind. David, if you want to say something,
Yeah,
feel
thanks,
free.
Wen. Yeah, I mean, if anybody has got another question, want to pop in the chat, we've got time for another question or two. If there's anything that's come up as Wen's been speaking that you want to put in the chat, and then I can pass that on to Wen. But thank you, Wen, for all those comments. That's fantastic. Lots of things there for people to think about, and there have been a lot of comments coming through on chat, actually agreeing with lots of the things you're saying there. So thank you for that. Somebody's just said thank you for your talk. Your voice is very soothing. There we go.
That's nice. Thank you.
Is there any more? There's no other questions coming up at the moment.
Okay,
Somebody
David.
said found the information about gamma study interesting. Would you be able to share a link about that research, please, if that's possible?
Yes.
And
I'll add the study to the gamma stuff that we did in Louisville. I'll add that to the sheet of paper with the questions, and I'll email that to you, David.
That's fantastic. Thank you. And then we'll get that sent out with all the notes from the conference itself. One question has just come in. You mentioned you had a book. I'd be interested to read it. And I know you've got more than one book, haven't you, Wen? They're available through your website, and they're available on Amazon as well, aren't they, I believe?
Not through my website. They're advertised on the website, but Amazon's the best place to go. And books on anything to do with gender and with aging are written in the name of Wenn, W-E-N-N, Lawson. previous to that, books on understanding autism, on how children learn, those sorts of things, are written under the name of Wendy. It's still me. I had more hair as Wendy. I don't have much left there, but never mind. You're all right, David. We've got about the same amount, I think.
Yeah, I'm
So yeah,
catching
you
up.
can find, if you type in Lawson W, you'll find most of my books, and they are advertised on my webpage, www.wennlawson.com.
Thanks.
And there's a YouTube channel under Wenn Lawson, lots of little animations and stories and things for people to watch, listen to, kids to watch, various information. Yeah.
That's brilliant. Thank you very much. And there's one thing there. What if any role has nature played in your self-care and learning to process the world?
Oh, I think it's played a big role. I'm very much at home. The natural world. Brian Cox is on tonight. I'm missing him. That's okay. The natural world is a big thing to me, and animals. I learned an awful lot from watching horses and dogs. I learned about relationships. I learned about a whole heap about self-care stuff from the natural world, and I think it's true as autistic people, we're probably, not for everybody, but we seem to be quite tuned in to the natural world for sure. Good teacher.
Brilliant. Thank you. Well, I think that's probably the questions. Nothing more's come in there at the moment. No. So can I just say, Wen, a huge thank you for joining us today and for the film that you sent earlier and being part of this year's conference. We really do appreciate that. And oh, there's some noise on the line. I don't know what that's coming from there. But yeah, really interesting, and thank you very much. And if you care to join us for the rest of the conference, you're welcome to stay. If you want to get to bed, no problem either. So, but thank you ever so much, and we really do appreciate that.
I appreciate having me, and I'll send that stuff as soon as I click off, David. I'll post
Thank
it to
you
you.
very much. That's brilliant. Thank you so much. Cheers.
Thank you.
Lots of thank yous coming through. Bye bye.
Bye from him. Bye.
Lots of excellent comments on the chat there from many of you about Wen's talk, and that was really quite something. Every time I hear Wen speak, and I've heard Wen speak for many years on and off, it's always thought-provoking and lots of things you learn and you hear about that really makes you think. So I hope that was of real interest to all of you. Okay, so second half of our conference, we're going to touch on employment to start with, because that will lead very nicely into the next presentation we have from our other guests today. But as you know, we've often spoken about employment is a major issue for autistic people. In the last year, in fact, the old statistics that we had for many years that said that 16% of people on the autistic spectrum were in work and 32% were in some sort of work. Those figures have been a bit blown away rather this year, because the Office for National Statistics came up with some figures last year that said that only 22% of people are in any kind of work, full-time or part-time. Just 22% of the autistic population are in work, which is appalling, and we all know that. So more's got to be done to get that put right and to make people understand that employing an autistic person can be a great advantage. And why shouldn't it be? Now, earlier this year, the National Autistic Society held a conference called Autism at Work. And at that conference, they had a guest speaker to open the conference. And that guest speaker was Chris Packham, who, of course, is very local to us here in Hampshire. And he did an opening address for each day of the 2-day conference. What I've done, I've put together some very short excerpts from his opening addresses, because I think he captures exactly what we all think about when it comes to autism in the workplace. So let's hear what Chris has to say about the employment situation. I'm delighted to present now Steve Bond, who, as many of you will know, is one of our Autism Ambassadors. If you remember last year, he talked about in our good news stories that the work that he's been doing, and that there was a new company going to be formed called Autek. And I think the last thing you said, Steve, was Autek, watch this space. So we thought, right, we'll get Steve now to fill that space in of what's been happening over the last year about Autek. Very pleased now to hand over to Steve, who's going to do the next presentation.
Thank you, David, for that introduction. Yes, indeed, we are around about 1 year old now, so I'm going to give you all a quick tour into what we've been doing in that year. I'm going to go and share my screen. There's three of us are going to be talking to you today. Myself, Steve Bond, we've got Kieran McGarry and Laura Cantliff, who are going to be joining us in a few minutes. So Autek, my view of Autek, and I was one of the co-founders with Alex Carter and Nathan Kiley. We formed this around about a year ago, as we said, is to think about alternative employment pathways. We started off autism, and we've developed over the year into a much more broad disabled people service. But the really key thing here, and I think this goes back to what we've heard in the previous two talks, is that we want work that engages interests. So if somebody's got a particular special interest, or something that really interests them, and they've developed talent in that area, that's kind of what we want to work with. And one of our recent stories is that we've just had a young man join us in Autek. He's a young man. He was working at Costa Coffee when we met him. He's spent since he was about 12 years old being a video producer, and that's the only thing that really gets him going, gets him up in the morning. So why can't he work as a video producer? We had a chat with him, and he's now working as a video producer with us, and his world has just changed because it's doing something that he absolutely loves, something that engages him, and of course he is incredibly talented at what he does. So this is kind of the model that we've created within Autek. At the moment, Autek comprises 7 directors and 2 staff. So you've seen we've grown, and that's very shortly, when I get contracts organised, going to become 3 staff that are working for us. So we're gradually building and growing. We've had a tremendous amount of support over the last year. I've got 2 little logos at the bottom there. There could be hundreds and hundreds of other ones of them, but particularly Enableability. We've got a partnership arrangement with Enableability that allows us to deliver a lot of our services as well. And NHS Solent Trust, you'll see a lot of our work has been delivered for the NHS Solent Trust. They've really taken on board what we've done and given us loads and loads of work. So we're incredibly grateful for them, but many other organisations as well. So what I'm going to do is, because we are fundamentally a video production company, that's just the way that you bring people into an organisation, and then you kind of work out what you're going to do. That's the way that we've sort of moved this. So we are a video production company. What I'm going to do is quickly walk you through a year of our delivery. So this is just a way, if it works, that is, of course, there it goes, of showing you the sort of things we've done and the sort of places that we've been over the last year. And this is great for me because I've got so much content that the guys that I work with have produced that I can make this really nice and graphic and I hope fun to go through. I'm going to talk quite quickly because it's quite a journey. So we started off a year ago at Falcon House, and so this is the sort of things that we create. So we create these panorama images, we put them together in virtual tours. We call it a What's It Like service, so helping autistic people, disabled people, or people who live with anxiety accessing places and services that they need to go to. So we started our journey at Falcon House. This is a CAMS organisation in Portsmouth, part, as you can see, of NHS Solent, and that was the first place that we visited. If I click on these targets, it then takes us through. So the next sort of place, or the thing that happened, as you probably all know, was that COVID struck. So we were halfway through filming in Battenberg House, and COVID's totally changed all the arrangements. They had to set up COVID stations, and access all changed and everything. So this is the next stage in our journey, is that we had to go back to places and change what we'd done already to make sure it was current. So there's no point saying what's it like in a place if it doesn't address COVID, because that's one of the main anxieties that was around at the moment. So from Battenberg House, we then moved on. The next set of anxieties that we came to was, oh, crikey, GPs. What on earth is going on for GP? How do I ever contact a GP in the middle of the pandemic? What's it like in there? How safe is it going to be? So we, in this case, Stubbington Medical Practice, we went there and we had a look inside. This is one of the GP consulting rooms, and you can see the chair you'll sit where the GP is. You've got the sanitizer there. This is part of a tour that takes you in from the entrance of the place right the way through the reception, the waiting rooms, and into this consulting room. Following that, we then COVID vaccinations. You probably remember these. So we provided a What's It Like service for people who are accessing the COVID vaccination. The next step through, I'm going to increase the pace. We then went back to school. Everyone was then starting to think, well, schools, we've got year 7 transition, we've got new people coming into our schools. How on earth can we get them into school and show them what the place is like, talking about it? So we went to Warblington School and we created a virtual tour for them. Of course, during our tour, we had to visit loads and loads of toilets. Pretty much everywhere we go, but putting toilets in is a source of anxiety. So we had to make sure that we covered those, lots and lots of toilets. We weren't totally inside. Once the spring and summer came along, we managed to get ourselves out to places. So this is now at the wonderful QE2. You can see how gorgeous the place is. QE2 Activity Centre, where people with learning disabilities go and engage in a range of activities. Absolutely fantastic service if you don't know it. We then went on from there and we did some cricket. So we worked with Hampshire Disability Cricket to say, what's it like to come and play cricket for us, so we can get new participants to come in and play there. So we went and visited Cricket Ground and did lots and lots of filming around there. We then carried on, and Alex Carter, who's on this journey, he took a trip to the top of Butser Hill. I didn't, because I had a sore ankle on the day. So this is now the panorama view at the top of Butser Hill, and this was trying to encourage people sort of coming out of lockdown to start getting out and getting exercise and getting back their mental health through connecting with nature, which I'm sure Chris Packham would fully endorse for us. So that's the panorama view at the top of Butser Hill. We also went to hospitals. So this, some of you in Portsmouth will certainly recognise this hospital. This was for breast screening. We did a tour for that. We've also been to Gunwharf Quays, and we've created a virtual tour with a whole pile of it. This is by far and away the biggest piece of work we've done in terms of videos and the virtual tour. There's the Spinnaker Tower. And then we've kind of ended up the journey where we started, which is really cool. So this is now back to Falcon House again. And this is what the waiting room was like. So if you remember, I showed you the entrance before. This is what the waiting room, the main waiting room with the reception over there for Falcon House. And that was what it was like when we first went there. But of course, things change. And that's what it looks like now. And so we had to go back, create some new panorama images to show everyone what's it like now. There's no point showing somebody what it was like 6 months ago. It's got to be kept current and up to date. So that's like a year in our journey. That's where we've been to, and that's just a small proportion of the stuff. There's a whole bunch of other things that I couldn't include in that whistle stop tour. We have a web app. I'll just show you this so you can see on the logos all of the people, or pretty much all of the people that we've been working with. And if I was to click on one of those, we'd go and have a look at Hampshire Disability Cricket. We've got that created now, and we're just going through a development phase. As you can see, it's getting a bit cluttered at the bottom. We've got so many customers now that we're going to rearrange that into a new way so that people can access the content. And the beautiful calming screen, this is kind of what we're about. We're trying to create apps and processes that work for autistic people, and keeping people calm, making it so it's not confusing. So that's why we need to change it, because it is confusing now, but making sure there's not lots and lots of links and bits and pieces on there. This is just, you want to access something, you click on it and you're in there. So I wanted to just now, very briefly, before I hand you over to Kieran, who's going to talk about sort of business development and what's next for us, is just to show you a couple of the innovations that we've done. And this is where the technology really may fail me. So again, apologies for the clunkiness. So one of the things that we've created is what we're starting to call easy view videos. So if I just maximize this, so most of you, I'm sure, will be well aware of easy view reports and things that people create. Well, Alex is one of our main creators, and Alex Carter has created this new way of doing videos. I'm just going to play it and shut up for just a couple of minutes so you can see how it works.
Have you been wondering what it's like to have the COVID-19 vaccine? In this film, we hope to show you what it's like to go to the vaccine centre. We will tell you what you need to do before you go to the vaccine centre, what will happen when you're there, and what to expect afterwards. When it's your turn to have the COVID-19 vaccine, the NHS will send you a letter. You will need to have...
So the idea that you can see there with what we're doing with that is that we're using that format of very, very simple sentences, one topic per sentence. You can either watch the lady talking about it, or you can, if you want, you can still hear the words and look at the images. So you've got a number of ways of accessing in very, very simple to understand terms what's going on with that. And that's kind of what we're trying to achieve with these, what we call easy view videos. It's particularly for people with learning disabilities. We've got another variant of the same, which is Makaton signing, which is really important. So I'm going to maximize that again. So if you listen to this.
Have you been wondering what it's like to have the COVID-19 vaccination? When it's your turn to have the vaccination, the NHS will send you a letter.
So as you can see, it's the same video, it's giving the same content, but it's doing it in a very, very different way. And that's kind of what we need to do, so because all the people who look at and watch our services, they're all different. And so it's really trying to find ways of getting that message over. And you note that in the Makaton signing, we don't have the easy read variant of it. There's no point having pictures coming up. Your eyes need to be focused on the signing. So that's how we do that, but with a very, very plain, easy background, which was why we've used the walls, and we had some feedback from people with learning disabilities in terms of how to make that work. And the final thing, the final innovation, again, entirely down to Alex Carter, is what we call the point of view video, or the walkthrough video. Again, I'm just going to set this running so you can see how it works.
Welcome to Gunwharf Quays, waterfront outlet shopping in the heart of Portsmouth. This is the main tunnel entrance that is from the Hard Interchange, train station, bus links, Whitelink Ferry and Gosport Ferry into Gunwharf Quays. As you walk through the tunnel, you descend down under the train bridge, which may be loud with trains overhead.
So this is a new way of providing information. You can see the content of it is a video.
As you exit the tunnel, you'll see on your left-hand side the taxi rank.
And the information is
as
provided
you reach the
as you
crossing,
walk through it.
You'll start to incline up to the main shop
I can
level.
pause it because she's talking over me. And obviously at the top left hand, you can see this map. So it's for orientation purposes. Gunwharf Quays is a massive, massive place. So it just gives people an idea of where you are as you're progressing through the video. So that's my sort of fun bit over, all the colourful content and everything. Very, very happy to take questions at the end, but I'd like to hand over to Kieran now, who's going to talk a little bit about his experiences within Autek.
So yeah, my name's Kieran. I'm the, as it's so eloquently put on the slide, the business development manager for Autek. I just want to talk a little bit about why I joined, and then some of the things we're doing and some future plans. So I got approached by Alex Carter, who has been mentioned a few times already, because they were creating Autek and wanted people with a range of disabilities to be part of the team in working towards making these videos. Now, as I'm trained as an actor, I'm now doing a PhD in disability studies. So I'm looking at ways of making performance lives easier for people with disabilities. And this seemed like a natural fit in terms of gaining some experience in the ways that disabled people are held back in society, and maybe ways of helping. For us as Autek, the main USP, if you want to call it that in a marketing sense, is that we are experts by experience. We all have some experience of anxiety dependent on our disability. For instance, I have depression and anxiety clinically, so I have that experience, and the rest of the board plus anyone who we employ has some kind of experience with anxiety going to places. That includes kind of this idea of lived experience. We try to make sure that we are making things and we talk about the things we go through as disabled people, and how we might find it easier to go to somewhere or during these What's It Like tours. And that's a main part of how we work. So everything is done by disabled people in a way that works for disabled people. But more than that, and going back to what was said in one of the previous videos, is that it's about employment. We are making sure that anyone we employ, given the right opportunities, is part of the disabled community, whether that be autism or whether it be like myself, I'm visually impaired, that we're doing things to help people get into employment, because as it was said, the employment rates for people with autism is extremely low, and that goes across the board to lots of different disabilities. So it's one of those main parts of what we do. Now, I think what's really important is that what we do is video production. So a lot of that work that is done is to do with that. And while in the video before it said that autistic people shouldn't be just categorized as being able to go into tech, a lot of what happens is that they are in our company, at least, in video production, which is great. They're finding, like Steve said, what they enjoy doing, and as long as it is what they enjoy doing and it's what they want to do and it's what they're comfortable doing, then we are giving them the opportunities to do that. And I think, as you can see from what Steve has shown, we are doing that in a way that is proper and that is good for the community. We are trying to move along a little bit in terms of it not specifically being about autism, like Steve said before. Like I said, I'm visually impaired, and we are now looking at expanding the What's It Like experience to people with visual impairments. As a visually impaired person myself, I know how difficult it can be to go to a new place, not knowing what things look like, not knowing the layout, not knowing the dangers, the obstacles, the trip hazards that can be in place at somewhere that you've never been before. Normally, I have to go somewhere with someone, either my fiance or someone else, who would be able to kind of take me through some of those pitfalls if they can. So we're trying to make something that does the same job as the What's It Like videos that works for people with anxiety, to move that towards people with visual impairments, and that is a whole lot of different challenges. So that's something new that we're looking at. And the other thing is that obviously we're looking at things at the moment in so Portsmouth, Southampton, this area of the country. We are now looking at expanding that down to Plymouth, which is where me and Laura, who will be speaking in a minute, we are both in Plymouth doing PhDs, both to do with disability. So we have the opportunity to expand what we're doing to another place to help a whole new set of people, and employ and engage the disabled community in Plymouth in the same way that we're doing it in Portsmouth and Southampton and the rest where we are. The last thing I want to say before I hand over to Laura is that we are now looking at a project called What's My Anxiety, which is a set of videos, documentary style videos, that look at what anxiety is for people with disabilities, different disabilities. So whether it be autism, whether it be visual impairment, whether it be deaf and hard of hearing, whatever it may be, there are always going to be different anxieties that come from having that disability. So we are looking for people to get involved. Anyone that has experience in that field or who wants to be involved in that, please contact us, because we're always looking for different people to help us and make that a reality. As all we do is funding and being paid by different companies to make things. We need funding for that. And yeah, that's my bit done. I hope I've been informative and helpful. I know I rambled on a little bit and I didn't have any visual aids with like Steve did. But I will now hand you over to Laura, and she can tell you a bit more about some other stuff that we're doing. So thank you very much.
Hello, everyone. I hope you can hear me too. My name's Laura. I am the Business Support Officer at Autek. What that means is that I help organise and coordinate our video production team, who are amazing. I track workflow and delivery of our services, and probably the biggest thing that I do is I liaise between staff and Steve. So a lot of emailing to Steve. But I also take care of other administrative jobs as well. Some background about me: I am an autistic and dyslexic ADHDer. I'm also a dance graduate. I have a master's in performance training, and I am, like Kieran said, currently working towards a PhD that focuses on neurodivergent creative arts practice. So it was really special for me to hear Wenn speak today, because I'm very much at the beginning of my journey as a researcher. It was lovely to hear from someone who's sort of seasoned. I'm also a freelance dance practitioner, and I lead movement workshops for disabled people who might not have access to mainstream or commercial dance classes. On paper, I don't come across as the kind of person who would want to work in business support for an immersive technology company. By no means am I tech savvy. I do not fit the autism stereotype. And Steve and Kieran will attest to this, that technology actively sabotages my life. But here I am. And it turns out I do actually have the stuff to do this job. And some of that comes from my creative experience, and some of it comes from my lived experience as a neurodivergent disabled person. As an autistic person, I rely heavily on regulating most of my life. I thrive on organization and routine, and I tend to document and analyze every moment of my life, because that's the best way for me to process everything that happens to me. I know what it feels like to have anxiety about going to new places or even familiar places. I also know what it feels like to exist in places where accessibility is very much at the bottom of the agenda or not on the agenda at all. All of these things are experiences and skills that have application to my work at Autek. I was first introduced to Autek by Kieran after I essentially ranted to them about the difficulties of working as a disabled person. When I joined Autek, my position was not something that already existed in the company. I was the first contracted member of staff, starting a new role of project support officer. My initial task was to create a system of organization to keep track of all of our projects, because new work coming in very quickly. When I joined the company, I was really taken aback. I thought, oh my gosh, this must be such a busy time. I'm sure when these projects are finished, everything will calm down and I'll have time to... No, everything got fast and it stayed fast. Things have not calmed down, but it's actually really great. It shows that what we do is necessary and important. It's also great for me because my job is never finished. And in fact, it's evolving into something more. There's always another project in the works, and we are always growing. And because of this, I'm now moving into a new role of business support officer. We're also now moving to contracted work for some of our video production team because we have such high demand for their time and their skill set. For many of us, what started as a small part-time job or a freelance job is now moving into our main job. This is what I do now, which is great. There is also a great opportunity for personal growth in the company. So something that's really exciting me is what Kieran just talked about, the What's My Anxiety project. This is the first project where my role is not strictly as business support officer. I'm part of the production team, and I'm learning a lot from the video producers who have a lot of experience in making something like this. I can contribute my management skills to the project, and in exchange, I'm soaking up all of their knowledge, which will then in turn make me better at my business support role. So it's a great way to learn and grow. I also feel it's especially important for projects like this one to be disability-led, and this is the case for everything that Autek does. Being disabled and working for a disability-led company who make disability-orientated work is new for me, but it has changed the way that I approach my working life in general as a disabled person. From my experience in most workplaces, accessibility and inclusivity are not considered a priority. Working in Autek is possibly the most comfortable I've felt in my identity as a disabled person in work. It doesn't mean it's not really hard or really stressful or scary, which it is, but it hits way different. At Autek, accessibility is a part of every conversation that I have every day. And not just accessibility for me, it's accessibility for the video production team, our new staff, our board of directors, our customers, and our viewers who rely on our content to go to new places. In other workplaces, disability is more of a taboo subject, and accessibility is not usually part of any conversation. And it's in the past become my burden to raise accessibility with my employers, to disclose my access needs, and usually those are not equipped to support me in the way that I need, and it can be very frightening and intimidating. In a disability-led workplace like Autek, I feel confident to say what access I require to do my job, and part of my job is also making sure that my colleagues have their access needs respected too, so that we're all in a place that we can do our best work. I'm really excited to see what happens with Autek for the next year. This first year has been pretty hectic. We're hoping as our company evolves and our services are expanding, that our team of people can also continue to grow as well. And that is, well, I'll make that my final note, is that we are always looking for new people. Our team has grown a lot over the last few months and our workload continues to grow as well. We need help and skills and experiences of other disabled people who might be interested in what we're doing. And that's me done. Thank you, everyone.
Well, thank you to Laura, Kieran and Steve for that excellent presentation there about the work that Autek are doing, and it's great to hear that sort of work is going on and giving opportunities, which we would love to see more of everywhere, really. Thank you so much. Now we're going to move back to the main presentation again, because now we're going to hear from some more of our Autism Ambassadors. As you know, last year we had our good news stories and we had a few brave Autism Ambassadors who were willing to step up to the mark and record something for us. Well, I'm pleased to say 4 have again this year, and so we're going to now hear from them.
Hi, I'm Carly, and I've been an Autism Ambassador for almost 2 years now, based in Basingstoke. I work for Barnardo's Hampshire Specialist Parenting Support Service, and I'm a lead facilitator for the Signet for ASC programme. After developing a successful digital programme in response to the pandemic, the Signet course is in high demand, but with our waiting list continuing to grow, we wanted to make it easier to access the course. So we decided to pilot an alternative delivery model, allowing parents to complete the learning more flexibly, offering 2 workshop sessions rather than a weekly group. 51 parents and carers engaged with the course right through to the end, describing it as informative, helpful, reassuring and interesting. And our average star rating out of 5 stars was 4.23. We supplemented the online learning and Zoom workshops with support via telephone, emails and video to make sure that information was presented in different ways to accommodate everyone's learning styles. Participants loved the flexibility of our new delivery model. They could work through the course at their own pace from any location, and 32% of our pilot group completed the programme together with another family member. The outcomes of the pilot were encouraging. 89% of respondents showed either a partial or total improvement. We also noticed a 26% reduction in the percentage of parents who had concerns about their child's anxiety. We're pleased to say that our Signet waiting list has reduced by 29.6%, and a further 150 parents and carers have enrolled on our Signet workshop programmes starting in 2021. We absolutely love the work we do and feel honoured to work with such amazing, dedicated parents and carers, helping to support autistic children to achieve their potential and celebrate their neurodiversity. In 2022, we are introducing an additional session on sleep, and HSPSS will continue to deliver Signet alongside our other courses. Feel free to contact our friendly team for more information, and thank you for listening.
Hi, I'm Rachel.
And I'm Andy from Winchester Science Centre, and we've recently joined the Autistic Ambassador Network. We've been doing some quite exciting things over the last year. It's during lockdown and ready for our reopening. We've got a brand new exhibit on our top floor that's based around sound, but we've also been looking at some of the feedback from our visitors to make sure that we can make the Winchester Science Centre as accessible as we possibly can. We've got the challenge that we've got a big metal and concrete building, a pyramid shape, that just captures all of the sound and just sort of reverberates it around. So there's not too much we can do about the shape of the building. But what we have done is we've had a look at some of the hot spots within the building, and we've put in some soundproofing and some dampening in order to quieten those down. So our entrance, our cafe, and a couple of other spots around the centre. We've also put in a kind of refuge space, which is this room behind us, the recombobulation room. And it's a soundproofed room where people can just go in. There's no furniture, there's no sensory stimulation in there at all. It's a very quiet room with soundproofing that quietens down the centre. You can adjust the lighting and it dampens down all of that effect so that people can have that reset before they're ready to come back out and re-engage with the centre. We've had some really good feedback on that.
We've also got some sensory backpacks. So these contain a social story, some ear defenders and some fiddle toys, and visitors can book these out before they come, or they can collect one on the day. We've also got ear defenders located around the building, up in Biospace, down in our show spaces and in the planetarium as well. So if any visitors need those things on the day, they can easily access them. We've also been giving our staff lots of training as well, and especially with kind of nervousness about going into show spaces, we are inviting visitors to come 5 or 10 minutes early to explore the space before they go in, so they feel more comfortable and welcome in our spaces.
We've had to change the way we used to do quiet hours. We've had to change the way that we do that because we're reopening on very limited hours at the moment, only weekends and school holidays. But we have brought in a scheme called Wonderful Wednesdays, where we open on a Wednesday in the evening, and our building, which can hold over 1,000 people, we've been having between 40 and 60 people coming in. So as you can imagine, they kind of disappear into the space. And we've had some autistic visitors who've come along and have really appreciated that quieter space and that quieter time. The official quiet hours we're going to look at trying to bring back in the new year as well as looking at all the feedback that we get and having a look at how we can implement that into what we do. So that's been our previous year. We're really looking forward to seeing what the year ahead will bring. If you have any questions or any queries, feel free to get in touch with us at access@winchestersciencecentre.org. Thank you very much. And yeah, we would love to get some of your feedback as well. Thank you very much.
Hello, my name's Rachel Whitfield and I work in the SEND team at King Edward's School in Southampton on Hill Lane. We've had a couple of wins this year, and the first is that the school has built a purpose kind of designed wellbeing centre which has low lighting, natural finishes, and lots of little spaces where people can take time out from their lessons. So all of our autistic children have an exit card, and they're able to leave the lesson that they're in if they're feeling overwhelmed, or if they're feeling that they just need a little bit of downtime. They can come in unstructured time at school, like at break times and lunch times, and just spend some time chilling out. We've got colouring, we've got fish, we've got jigsaws, got card games, Warhammer, which is not quite as chilled, got jewellery making. They can just come and do their own thing. So that's a massive, massive, massive win, that everybody has access to that space, and it's used really well. It's staffed to make sure that nobody's being really hectic in there. We've also started having neurodiversity celebration days. So far we have had a dyslexia and dyspraxia celebration day, which I know isn't autism, but we actually have later in the year an autism specific celebration day, where we have displays in the library, in the corridor. We have activities for group base. We have developed our online resources for pupils and for parents so that everything is really up to date, really great advice, promoting acceptance and not looking at difference. So it's been a real win. So we're going to have a neurodiversity day for autism and ADHD as well. And then a big neurodiversity celebration in March. We're going to have lots of artists, a music producer coming into school, like lots and lots of people who identify as neurodiverse, who are going to come in and work with small groups of children. And alongside that, our equality and diversity group are going to have a silent disco and do some donuts with awareness ribbons. So just things to raise the profile of neurodiversity. Like I really feel that we've done a lot this year, and it's been really successful with staff and students and parents as well. So lots and lots to be pleased with this year. Thank you.
Hi everyone, my name's Bruce Trussler. I work for the Professional Standards Department of Hampshire Police. Over the last couple of years, myself and another ambassador, Michelle Rebello-Tyndall, have been working on a number of animations covering the subject of autism. One for members of the public, particularly those on the spectrum, to help know what to expect should they need to call the emergency services for help. And the others have been training videos, animations for staff, initially within our contact centre, and then our frontline officers for training that's going to be happening early part of next year. And then it's been taken up by our initial training department for new members of staff across the constabulary to help them better serve members of the public they may encounter or need to help that are on the spectrum. It's a piece of work that we're both incredibly proud of because it will help provide a better service to the public and give officers increased knowledge in a really important area of their work. I believe they are going to be showing the animation, or one of them, next. So hopefully you enjoy.
Getting help from the emergency services. In an emergency, you might feel scared, upset or confused. You might not know how to get help or what to say, and you might need to communicate in a different way. So this video is to help you think about what to do. First, decide if it's an emergency. An emergency is when someone's life is in danger, there's a dangerous incident, or there's a crime happening. A non-emergency is when you need medical advice or mental health advice, you want to report a crime that happened, or if you want to give information about a suspicious activity. Using the telephone to get help. 999 is the emergency number. You can call 999 free from any phone, including most locked mobile phones. You can ask for ambulance, police, fire or Coast Guard services, and they will help you if you don't know. 112 is the European emergency number. You can call 112 for free if you are in an EU member country. You can speak your own language to get help quickly, and they will connect you to the service you need. So who answers the phone? The first person you speak to will connect you to the emergency service you need. The next person will have computers and maps to help find you. They cannot see you on CCTV cameras, and they can send help while asking you questions. They need to ask lots of questions to send responders to you. They will tell you what to do. Here's an example. A fire is definitely an emergency, so call 999 and ask for fire service. If they need other services, they will call them. What do they need to know? Your name, if you want, the phone number you are using, where you are, what is happening, and information to keep the responders safe. So let's look at these. You do not have to say your name. They can usually see your phone number, so they can call you back if the call is cut off. The most important information in an emergency is where you are. Look around you for landmarks like shops or signs. If you are in someone's house, look for letters addressed to them. In an emergency, the operator wants to send help quickly. So tell them what is most important, not lots of detail. Tell them of any dangers, like dogs or weapons or leaking chemicals, to keep the responders safe. Keep yourself safe. Don't take risks to take photos or move closer to see what is happening. How do you get help if you cannot speak on the telephone? Call the service you need. Press any keys to show the operator you are there, and they will tell you what to do next. You can sign up for a text service too. At any time, you can text register to 999. They will text you back to help you get set up. This service works on any mobile network in the United Kingdom. If it's not an emergency, don't call 999. These are the non-emergency numbers. Call these when you need health advice or to report a crime. Your local police service also has a website. You can tell them about something that is not an emergency. You can report a crime or something suspicious. This will be looked at as quickly as a phone call to 101. You do not have to give your contact details unless you need the police to contact you back. So now you know more about how to get help. 999 is the emergency number. 112 is the European emergency number. 111 is for health advice and 101 is for police advice. Or go online. This has been a joint project by Autism Ambassadors Michelle Rebello-Tyndall from Dimensions and Bruce Trussler from Hampshire Police. This video was made by Dimensions. Dimensions is a non-profit organisation that supports people with learning disabilities and or autism.
There we go. Thank you very much to our ambassadors who've provided those videos for us today. So it just gives you an idea of what's happening and what things are going on all throughout the year. So thank you to all our ambassadors, not just those who sent in videos today. We can only feature a few of the things you've been doing this year, but really thank you for your commitment. Thank you for all the things you're doing. Please keep doing them and please keep sending us your good news stories. We really want to hear what's happening. So just to finish up, the future of our scheme, well, we've got online training sessions already planned right through to the end of March next year, and we will be planning some more as we get into next year. So we will continue to be getting more ambassadors on board. As I mentioned at the beginning, we're going to have some more online networking meetings of ambassadors next year, so look out for that. We'll be circulating you all about that. Our Facebook group is still lively and lots of people still interacting on our Facebook group. If we can get more ambassadors on there, even better, because it's a great way to share ideas, thoughts and advice. So please continue to keep being involved in the Facebook group. We want to try and get more ambassadors, of course, and particularly from shops, community, leisure, and from employers into the scheme. So if you've got any connections anywhere, please spread the word and get it out there. And of course, as always, we want to build the scheme based on your feedback. You're the ambassadors, you're the people out there doing this. So please feedback to us at any opportunity you have, any thoughts you may have about the scheme. As for today's conference, we'd love your feedback on that as well, because this year's conference was built on what we did last year, and next year's will obviously be built on what we do this year. So Vanessa will be sending you a link after the conference is finished, asking you a few questions. If you can feed those back to us, we really would be keen to receive those so that we can make next year's conference even better. We finish with that saying that we always use in the ambassador scheme: the smallest of actions can make the biggest difference, and you'll probably find that everyone may benefit from those actions as well. So please keep carrying on doing what you're doing. We need those communities of our areas around here to think autism, and what you're doing is enabling people to do that. So thank you everybody for joining us. Thank you, and hope you've enjoyed the conference we've put together this year for you. Once again, our huge thanks to Wenn Lawson for joining us all the way from Australia today. And thank you to everybody who's taken part in today's event, and to my fellow ambassador team who've been beavering away behind the scenes, keeping things working and making sure everything's happening okay. And we'll see you all next year. So thank you all very much and enjoy the rest of the day. Bye-bye.